Well, thanks for joining us today. This is ArcherPoint's presentation on the future of upgrades in NAV and Business Central. We're glad that you've joined us today. So happy to have you part of our community. The time to upgrade is definitely now, and I'll be sharing with you about that. My name is Dave Kopp. I am the Upgrade Advisor and Senior Developer for ArcherPoint on the Upgrade team. I've been with the company for, probably about 14, 15 years. Kind of lose track at this point. I've been here so long. And so I live, eat, and breathe upgrades. So love upgrade questions, love upgrade topics. So if anybody has questions and you like to percolate those with me, feel free to reach out and contact me. I'm always happy to have a great upgrade discussion. So love the topic. We're going to dive right into talking about what are the next steps and issues for upgrades as we see it in the NAV world as we morph over to Business Central. Business Central has been out here for a while. That's the rebranding of Navision or Dynamics NAV, as some people might have understood that in years past. So Business Central is the new term for the upgrade world. And the topics that we're going to cover are the ISV readiness, how well those add-ons are situated for Business Central. We're going to talk about some functions now that might be easier in CAL versus AL extensions and the morphing to AL. We're going to talk about the ability to event all your current mods in CAL and then convert them over to the AL development environment. We're also going to talk about some cost aspects for supporting CAL and AL for an upgrade. And then finally, the ability to transition from CAL to AL for the development world. So we're going to kind of mix those topics in throughout this presentation, and they should be very informative. So what is the latest right now in the NAV community as far as BC is concerned as we switch over to that? The key with that is, are clients current on their NAV maintenance? And really, why should that matter to you? Well, so one of the latest support tickets from Microsoft that we had read previously is, if you're not current on NAV maintenance, you can only go to the latest version of BC 15, which is the latest version of their product in Business Central. Now, they have adjusted that policy to where if you upgrade to Business Central 15, they have what's called an N-2 policy. And for the time being, whenever you get your license in Business Central, they will allow you to pull the older keys up to 2 versions back. And the reason that that's going to be important is when we get to talking about the ISV add-on readiness. So right now, you can actually go get a Business Central 15 license, which Business Central 15 is the October 2019 release of Business Central. In that version, though, there is no more CAL available. So you have to, when you upgrade to Business Central 15, that is an AL-only development environment. So that does make the upgrade to straight to that version a little bit more complicated. But we're going to talk about what your options are to jump up to that version or stop at an intermediate version. And why should you care about that? Well, it is actually easier to go to Business Central 14 first, which Business Central 14 is the spring 2019 release of the product. And in that version, it is the last version that supports both CAL and AL development. And why is that important? Well, the reason is, it's easier if you're on a much older version of NAV to jump to Business Central 14, do what's called the eventing process, which we'll dive into that in a little bit. And then once you've gotten fully evented in Business Central 14, then schedule your second phase upgrade then to Business Central 15. You can technically go all the way through that process, but that makes that one upgrade that much longer and more complex if you jump all the way to Business Central 15. We'll also talk about the ISV add-on availability as well, because that's a key topic. So what are some of these other hurdles? Well, like I like to mention to people, not all ISVs are created equal. And the problem with that is some ISVs are ready for Business Central, some are not. The mixing and matching version compatibility has been a little bit of an issue here recently. It's not insurmountable, but you just have to do your due diligence before you start an upgrade to actually, make sure you're on the right versions. So I'll give you some examples with that. So Serenic Human Capital Management, formerly HR Payroll, they were only currently published up to Business Central 13 on-prem. They did, however, release a new Business Central 14 update to use with that particular client and executable version. So you have to be aware of what version a particular add-on might be published to. Now, again, I'll just say a caveat. All add-on providers are continuing to develop for other versions of Business Central. So even when you listen to this presentation, definitely if you see any examples on this list, you can always go out to those add-on providers and ask them what is their current compatibility. Another example is Walter Kluwer. They have a CCH tax add-on. Their older version of their tax add-on was only published up to NAV 2016, which was called Sales Tax Office. And then they jumped to a newer variety of tax add-on called SureTax, and it was only published for BC 14 or higher. So they chose to skip over BC 13. So if you were on BC 13 and you had one add-on that's only published for 13, and then you needed CCH and it's only for 14 or higher, that's where you really have to mix and match the version compatibility to make sure the version that you're going to, whether that's BC 14, BC 15, or later, that you go check to make sure all of those add-ons are published for the version that you're going to. Otherwise, you could definitely have some issues with that. I think as of the date of this publication, like Lanham add-ons are only published up to BC 14 on-prem. So again, if you're talking about whether you want to go on-prem or the SaaS route, you have different varieties and mixtures of add-on providers that are published for specific versions of BC, whether that be on-prem, whether that be SaaS. So you definitely need to do your due diligence. A couple different things I'll direct you to is some links that you can go check out. These links talk about the release schedule for Business Central, formerly known as NAV. What you're going to see is that they have now gone to, instead of doing one major release a year, they actually do two major releases. One is now in the spring and one's in the fall. Followed up with, in the old Navision world, it was called cumulative updates. They were issued typically every other month or every month on that schedule. So you might have two majors and up to 10 minor releases or called cumulative updates in the old world. Now those are called the two majors and the other ones are called minor releases. So you can definitely check out these links. The one thing that I'll point out though is the Business Central on-prem mainstream support. It has a release support from Microsoft all the way out to October 2023, whereas all other versions of Business Central are only going to be supported only up to 18 months. So what you really need to keep in mind is another potential advantage of going to 14 is that it's a good plateau version to do your eventing on. It does have the 4.5-year support. So it might be of interest to just check that out. It's also possible that you can go to 15 with no problem, and that's okay. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the ISV readiness. So I like to tell people some ISVs are definitely more ready than others. And I think the biggest challenge is converting over into this extension model in AL. When the ISVs convert over to it, it is going to truly make upgrades and development, much more robust and cleaner and make the upgrades cheaper. The challenge is getting over that hurdle. So we've had some ISVs out there that were really on the forefront of this, getting their extensions published, even as the versions are rolling out for Business Central. And we do, unfortunately, have some ISVs that are kind of behind. They might be 6 to 9 months behind. So all that to say, not all ISVs are created equal in their ability to keep up with this turnaround. So you definitely want to talk to your partners, your ISVs, and say, hey, where are you at in this life cycle? Because are you able to keep up, or are you lagging significantly behind in this area? Some ISVs are still in Cal only. So we do have some ISVs that are published in VC14 Cal, and some have actually made the full jump to AL extensions, and they're beyond 14. They're into 15. They're already developing their version 16 extensions, which will be the spring 2020 release. So all that to say, our motto right now is upgrade at least to Business Central 14. I wouldn't even recommend 13 anymore if you can avoid it. 14 is really the version you want to get to at a bare minimum, unless you have a particular ISV that's only published to 13. But again, you just got to keep in mind 13 is only going to be under release support from Microsoft for 18 months, whereas 14 has a much longer timeline. So 14 definitely gives you the best ability to move all your mods out into events. So let's talk about some exceptions to full eventing. So let me give you a little history about eventing. So back in the day, Microsoft, we needed to find an approach to get upgrades cheaper, okay? And to really do that, you have to go to an architecture where your mods do not sit within the Navision or Business Central base objects, which all of us know, all of our mods, they all get stuck in base objects or add-on objects. So the problem with that is it makes upgrades inherently more expensive because your mods are all interspersed within Navision or Business Central's code base, or even your ISV's code base. So the difficulty with that is it creates cost whenever you have mods in base or add-on objects to merge those forward into later versions. So what Microsoft came up with is this architecture called eventing. And eventing, simply stated, is your mods get pulled or ripped out of the base or add-on objects. They get put in custom objects, and those custom objects subscribe back to the base or add-on objects using eventing logic, so that whenever something gets run in the base object, it automatically has what's called a hook or a subscriber to then fire off your mod that's sitting out in its own custom object. So the beauty of that is there's no more object merging, which if you've done upgrades before, that's one of the large costs of upgrading is merging code that you've interspersed in the base objects forward from old to new. So this eventing logic is really, truly just a great thing for Microsoft, because we're going to pull those mods out, put them in the custom objects. So couple topics we have to talk about, though, is if an add-on is not fully evented, okay, which means we have mods tied or inside those add-ons, we can't event that code inside of an add-on until the add-on is also evented. So that just means if you're going through an eventing project in VC14, pulling mods out, you'll really want to focus on just pulling mods out of the base objects and not add-on objects if they are not also fully evented yet. So that may mean you have a part 1, part 2 of your eventing, and that means, yeah, you pull the mods out of the base Navision Business Central objects, but you may have to wait until your ISV is also fully evented and published as an extension, so that way you can rip those mods out as well. One of the things we ask people to do is if you find in base nav that there's not an event or a subscriber to your support to support a particular mod you have, you can actually submit requests using GitHub to Microsoft to actually produce an event or a subscriber to support that mod. Or you can take that as an opportunity to retool or rewrite, how you've done that particular mod, so it makes it simpler to use an already existing event or subscriber, which we call in the development world kind of a hook. So that just means anytime the base code fires, it also fires off your code. So it does give you a way to, when you're doing eventing, to kind of redevelop some of those hooks. And definitely you want to kind of avoid what we call anti-patterns, commented out base code, .NET calls. That's kind of more for a deeper dive developer. Some other exceptions out of the client's or customer's control. The table schema, if it's exceeded the 8K kilobit allowed by SQL, you may need to consider a hybrid where you're doing both AL and CAL. And that definitely makes it a little bit more complex, but not completely undoable. And again, that's probably a deeper dive development topic. If your ISV has a BC SaaS version of the product that's not compatible with Business Central on-prem, maybe you can ask that ISV vendor for the source code, or if they would consider publishing an on-prem version. So again, you really need to interrogate your ISVs, what versions and varieties they have published at the time that you're going to try to do your upgrade. You might even consider an incremental methodology, event what's touched. So when you go through an upgrade, there's what we call merge conflicts that either the PowerShell merger, or if you're using a tool like Merge Tool from mergetool.com, anything that the tools cannot auto-resolve, we call merge conflicts that are more manual. And maybe it's those manual conflicts that you want to spend the most time eventing. So if you get those that the tools can't auto-merge, maybe use that as your first pass of stuff that you should event, because if the tool can't auto-merge it, you're going to have to merge it anyway as a conflict, and use that as your opportunity to try to do that eventing first. You can also look at different customizations you've done or bug fixes. You might even do a few different releases for eventing. So you might break up your eventing into a few different phases, and that's perfectly acceptable too. You might do 50% in your first upgrade and then follow it up with a second phase eventing project, maybe even tied to some add-on conversion from CAL to AL. I would do extensions when necessary in AL. So if you don't have all of your code base on AL and extensions, then maybe do it in CAL, but event in CAL, and then only fully convert over to extensions when all of the add-ons are AL code-based and you've done all of your eventing as 100%. So only when you've gotten to that fully evented extended component, so all ISVs are extensions, and you've fully evented your code base 100%, then go ahead and move all of your customs then at that point, your 100% evented code mods to an extension or multiple extensions. You may actually have a scenario there where a hybrid AL and CAL may be required. And that's going to be, if you have, let's say, 5 add-ons and 2 are only published in CAL and 3 are published as AL extensions, you're really not going to have a way around that. I mean, you're required to do what the add-on providers are providing. So, if you have a mixture, then you're going to have to function in that hybrid mode for a while until all of them are published in AL. So when is a hybrid AL versus HAL and CAL appropriate? Well, one of those is the table schema limit exceeds 8 KB. So, Microsoft's taken up a lot of the table real estate. And so if you add an ISV that exceeds that 8 KB limit, you're definitely going to have to potentially go to an ISV that uses AL as the extension to help avoid that. We don't typically run into that as much, but I know as Microsoft keeps taking up that real estate, you're definitely going to have to use more AL extensions instead of the CAL, because CAL is definitely going to tie those mods, like extra fields in a base table, to that original base table. So if you can use an extension, then it's off in its own joined table. So you just got to keep that in mind. The ISV only has an extension to their product, and customer has mods to that product. So obviously, if the ISV is published as an extension and you have others that are not, you're going to have to function in a hybrid mode. If you're not planning on moving to SaaS, which SaaS requires all ISVs to be published as AL extensions. No questions about it. They cannot do CAL. So if you're on SaaS, you have to be published as AL extensions. So if that's true, then you're not going to be, you're not functioning in a hybrid mode. If you're not going to SaaS, it's possible you could get by with doing a hybrid for a period of time until all of those ISVs are published in AL. Here's some gotchas about running in hybrid mode, Cal and AL. So the AL code base cannot be seen by Cal. So if you have some mods in Cal and you also have some mods in AL, your Cal code base cannot see the AL code base. So that's what makes it a little bit tricky, because if you're running in both modes, the AL and Cal, your AL can see Cal, but not the other way around. Also, if you have AL and Cal that you're supporting in the same database, it definitely is a little bit more difficult for your developers because they have to maintain two different varieties of code base. So if at all possible, it's not considered best practice to be functioning in a hybrid unless you're forced to. But if you have the choice and you can avoid being in hybrid mode, I would definitely recommend that. Try not to function in hybrid if you can avoid it. If you have a mixture of ISVs and you can't get around it, then so be it. But if you can avoid it, please do. Because it may be inevitable with all the complexities of different mixtures of ISVs. You can also look at some new functional equivalent logic tied to inbound, outbound processes. Sometimes those are still getting worked on by Microsoft. I know when Business Central 14 came out, they were still working on some inbound, outbound processes that had not been fully rectified in that version. I think they've corrected a lot of those now in Business Central 15. So just be aware of that, especially inbound, outbound processes that are not wholly inside Business Central. Those can be the things that get you, like file movement, imports, exports. So just be aware of that to see if those processes are fully working and functional in the version you're going to. I could say that it's definitely going to be easier to do your eventing in Cal and then to move it to AL later. That's just my personal preference. Just to recap one topic about eventing in Cal, I think it's usually the easiest if you event in Cal first and then do your conversion to AL once all of your eventing is completed in Cal. I typically just find, to move stuff partially between Cal and AL and forcing you to go into hybrid mode is not going to be the most efficient. So I prefer personally just to get all my eventing done in Cal and then do the Cal to AL conversion and make your extensions. Some additional pros and cons of supporting mixed mode. Definitely more complex to support Cal and also AL extensions at the same time. Again, we've already talked about it. Cal can't see AL. Definitely using the debugger is going to be more complex when you're having to support both. Again, not impossible, but it's definitely going to be more complex. You may even have to pay for more costly development resources because they have to know both environments. So just keep that in mind if you're hiring someone to help support you internally, that if you're in hybrid, they got to know both the Cal development environment and the AL development environment. I think it's easier to transition a developer to AL if they only use Cal, since they can learn in less pressure, smaller chunks of development. If they do their eventing in Cal, then it gives them time to do the switch over to AL and kind of learn that environment instead of trying to support both at the same time. I do think the design tools in AL are definitely more robust. So if you can get to that environment, it's definitely going to help. I think the AL development is a much sweeter environment, but you want to do that in a non-pressure situation. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so your fully evented extended, your ISVs are 2. Now what? All right. Is there an upgrade path to SaaS? Of course. So I'm going to show you kind of an old screenshot of the Business Central replicator I think this might look just a little bit different now, but the gist of it's the same. Essentially, your goal when you go to SaaS is you want to upgrade to the latest on-prem version. And again, I'm saying this is the way to do it. You want to go to the latest on-prem version, so then you can replicate your database using the replicator from on-prem to SaaS. There's a couple good reasons why I say that, but I want to show you kind of the screenshots of, how that happens. Again, the GUI of this might have changed a little bit, but the gist is about the same. This is the run replication now. It allows you to replicate the database on-prem up into the cloud, which is SaaS, okay? So these tools help you move the data from your current on-prem all the way into the cloud. Now, what I'm going to tell you, the reason why you want to do that and go on-prem, upgrade to the latest on-prem first, is you need to test that the SaaS version, performance-wise, is to your liking, okay? Because if it's not, you definitely need to be able to function in on-prem while you're working out maybe the performance issues of being on SaaS. And I'm not saying there are going to be any for sure, but I have seen a few that the clients were glad that they migrated from on-prem to SaaS, so that essentially you can be live in your on-prem version, you can run the replication to SaaS, and while you're testing in that SaaS database, you can still be live in your on-prem version for your normal operations. And then once all your users have tested the SaaS version, then you can wipe that database in SaaS, run one final replication, and then go live on SaaS. So the reason is it's going to protect you to make sure that the performance is acceptable to you on SaaS before you move it all and then you decide, oh, there's an issue. So that's the safest way you want to replicate up to SaaS. This kind of gives you a visualization of what things are, kind of like if you're a mountain climber, these different camps, so to speak. So basically you start out on Business Central on-prem, you event and decouple your code, you'll wait for the ISVs to release extensions, you customize those extensions, and then you're in the latest version of on-prem, and you replicate into the cloud if you so choose to SaaS. You do have the option to stay Business Central on-prem, but you can also entertain the idea to replicate all the way into the SaaS cloud. And this is just another diagram of the same thing, so pretty much the same visual. So basically, just to recap that, on-prem is essentially your base camp before you replicate to SaaS. And these are just the list of things that you need to take care of, before you make that ultimate leap to SaaS. You definitely have to be fully evented. You definitely have to have everything published as extensions, your ISVs, and all your mods. You also have to realize that in SaaS, there is no desktop client anymore. The modern client or the web client is the client that's available in Business Central 15 or later. So you definitely want to be aware of that. 14 is the last client that has the desktop client and the web client. And 15 and beyond is the modern client, or what we call the web client. So you definitely need to make sure you're aware of that. You also need to evaluate dependencies if you decide to go to SaaS, about SSRS queries, jet reports, ISVs that are not extensions yet, because those can actually prevent you from going to SaaS. So at the time of this publication, I don't have all those details for all those vendors, but you definitely need to check that out before you entertain going to SaaS. Why does using AL matter for upgrades? Because obviously for this version, Business Central 15, the October 2019 release, it's the only development version that's available going forward from Business Central 15. There is no more CAL. So people need to be aware of the fact that the future is AL. You can't do CAL past Business Central 14. So that is the future development environment. Definitely has more features, advanced functionality, and it's definitely going to be able to lend you to eventing your mods better, so that you eventually, when Microsoft decides to lock out all mods and base objects, you'll already be there. You'll already be fully evented, fully extended. And Microsoft has weighed that here recently about locking down the base objects. They haven't done it yet, but I've seen that on their roadmap in the past. Getting to AL definitely helps reduce your upgrade costs. We've seen that drop as much as 50% after the first upgrade. And it really, I seriously cannot stress this point enough. Once you get to fully evented and fully extension based, your typical upgrade costs will plummet off a cliff. And I'm not just making those numbers up. We've done hundreds of upgrade quotes and beyond. When you jump past that architecture hurdle or bump, your upgrade costs will go down. Absolutely. And that was the whole point for Microsoft of doing this. They want upgrade costs to be easier, less disruptive, less costly. And this architecture hurdle definitely helps pull that off. We'll show this graph here about, your cost goes down, your disruption goes down, your project length goes way down, and even your risk. Because if you're not doing merging of code, your mods are parked out in this extension layer like an app on a smartphone. And so it's much less risky when you do upgrades under this model. Your upgrade costs, just to restate again, from the older versions, I've seen them drop by as much as half. If you're on 2013 or later, I've seen the second upgrade after that drop by at least 25%. So even if you're on a slightly newer version, which newer version I mean 2013 to 2018, the costs still go down after that first upgrade. If you're on much older, you're going to see those costs drop just dramatically. So, and then typically those costs continue to go down as well. And again, it's based on the fact that we're all using extensions and events. So, getting to the last part of my presentation here, most common reason not to upgrade. Here's what I found clients' voice as, it's fine. It works good like it is. We just want it to be like it is now. There's no reason to upgrade. And I'd like to just point out examples of other it's fine technology for you to ponder when you think of why should I upgrade, okay? Because we have a lot of examples in our lives of technology at one point in time that was just fine. So let me just scroll through those for you. I will point out the old rotary phone. It was just fine. The slide rule, yeah, it was just fine. Floppy disks, anybody remember those? Yeah, they were at one point, they were just fine. Your old tube TVs, yeah, they were just fine. The writing in the back window of your car, that was fun and it was just fine. Probably not the safest though. Your old green screen computer, oh, the days. That was just fine too, wasn't it? And your old flip phone. Yes, it was just fine. Now, when you look at these pictures, can you really imagine keeping the just fine technology now that you've actually embraced or gotten away from that and you have a smartphone? Can you honestly say, you know what? I'd really love to go back to just the old flip phone. No, nobody in their right mind wants to go back to the it's just fine technology. And that's kind of like what we're saying about upgrades. You don't know how much of an advantage it will be to you until you've done it and look back and you're like, wow, I cannot believe we were functioning on such an old version. And I'm telling you, that analogy is exactly the same as all these other technology examples. So I'll just let you ponder that and, mull that over, because I know we all chuckle over that old it's fine technology. We just can't appreciate it, until after we've upgraded. Yeah, definitely look to those past examples. And then I'll leave you with this point. The future is leaving without you. Seriously, it just left. So don't wait another 10 years before you consider upgrading. because you wouldn't definitely do that with all of your other technology either. And with that, I really appreciate your time. It's been so enjoyable to get to talk to you about upgrades. I could probably talk your ear off even longer, but if any of you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I love talking about this topic, and we definitely would love to talk to you if you'd like to talk more about upgrades. So thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching this ArcherPoint video. If you found it helpful, make sure to check out our website and blog at www.archerpoint.com. Additionally, if you have any questions regarding our products, services, or information in this video, feel free to email us at info@archerpoint.com. Thanks.